Welcome to the PreSales Podcast. I'm Mattie Stremic, and I'm hosting our brand new series on becoming a world-class solutions consultant. In this 6-part series, we'll unpack real-life stories and get actionable insights from pre-sales leaders, managers, and ICs that know what it means to go above and beyond in their pre-sales and solution roles.
Hi there, my name is Yuji Higashi, co-founder of PreSales Collective, and I have big news to share with you if you're a pre-sales leader or an individual contributor early in your career. We recently launched 2 training and enablement programs aimed at helping you take your career to the next level. Both programs were created by pre-sales leaders with input from dozens of SC veterans across our community. Now, we'll be running cohorts each month, so if you're interested in participating, visit us at presalescollective.com/enablement to submit an inquiry, and we'll send you details about each program, including this curriculum and schedule. We look forward to working with you on growing your career and being part of your career journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Hey, PreSales Collective, we're back with part 2 of our Becoming a World-Class Solutions Consultant series. And today I'm here with Brandi Anderson, a solutions consultant at Eightfold, to talk about the importance of building meaningful relationships. Brandi, it's such a joy to have you on the podcast. How are you feeling today?
I am feeling great, actually. So good. Very excited to be here.
Well, I feel like this has been a long time in the works. I remember the first time I ever heard you lead a session, I think it was at the end of 2021, and I left that so inspired. And I remember thinking that you really had something unique because the way that you tell stories, it doesn't just sound good, but you also bring so much substance and so much value to the audience. And so I think our audience is going to get a teaser of that today in this episode. So I'm so excited to get to talk to you and really kind of dive into what does it mean to truly build relationships.
You're going to make me blush. Thanks.
Well, it's very true. So before we actually get into the topic at hand, would love to know a little bit about your story because everyone has a unique way of ultimately getting into pre-sales. And so would love to know, how did you end up here?
So I think you said it before. Right now, I'm a solutions consultant for a company called Eightfold, and I am loving every minute of it. Literally the best job in the world for me. But I started off in like a completely different field. In college, I'd studied Mandarin, Chinese, and economics. So completely different than this. And then after college, it was like 2008 to 2010. And so we were in the middle of a recession. So I just did retail management for like ages. Got to the point where I realized I was kind of bored and wanted to do something else. And then I got into a boot camp and learned how to code and was a software engineer for a little bit. Realized that I also didn't like that. And then that led to like a different path in my career. I ended up as a solutions consultant working with partners and helping them to build out implementations for customers. And it was through that and some connections I had made on the sales engineering team for that company that I learned what the heck a sales engineer was to begin with. And also that it was a thing that I wanted to do. I think what ended up happening was the leader for that team, his name is Ryan, great guy. He said, "Hey, do you think this would be something you're interested in?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do sales, but let's talk about it." And he told me what it was. And I was like, well, I can try it. And then I tried it. And lo and behold, 4 or 5 years later, here I am.
Amazing. It's funny to me that you started off doing a software engineering boot camp because it's so hard to imagine your personality stuck behind a computer just coding away.
I think that every day now. You should have seen me coding every day. It was trying. It was hard.
No, I think that that's such an incredible background. I'm really excited to get your perspective on this building relationships component because it's such a core aspect of this role. It's not just about the technology and the technical side and even the industry expertise. It's also about that relationship component, both with customers and internally with other departments. From your perspective and your experience, why are relationships so important in pre-sales?
I think relationships are important, period. But especially in pre-sales, because we're really the connection point, the nucleus, I think, of the sales process. We touch so many pieces of the organization that it is really hard to be an island. We are just automatically in a space where, because we're touching other parts of the organization, because we're talking to other people, the relationships sort of naturally occur. And again, towards the island bit, if you are an island and you're thinking, I don't have to care about product, or actually the CSMs or customer relationship management team, we don't have to care about them, then you're going to have a really, really hard time doing your job.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up the idea of being on the island. That's not necessarily the best way to really be able to have an impact in this role. So what do you think are the most important relationships to really invest in internally?
I feel like all of them. And what I mean by that is that I, in particular, take every opportunity I can to build relationships with as many people as I can within the organization. I think it's because we sit in the center of a lot of things that it is especially important to build relationships with folks who move the sales process along, who help you to do your job better. So it's really hard to list out who we shouldn't be talking to, right? Because it's really everyone. We should have as many relationships as we can.
In your experience, do you find that the way that organizations are set up kind of help facilitate that relationship building across all those different departments? Or do you think that SEs often have to kind of go find and build out those relationships for themselves?
It really depends. So if I am an SE that works in an organization that is large and has systems and processes in place, then my hope is that the relationships that my leadership team has, that other SEs on the team have, those are already built out and established. And I'm kind of just coming along and into a team that is already really flowing. Like, the product is listening to the SE team, and we've got a way to share those thoughts and ideas. Same thing with our account executives and all the other people involved in our processes. The other half of that is I've been in organizations that don't have those processes in place. I've worked at quite a few startups, and it's all about building those processes. So I think it's, for folks who are in those spaces, super important for the SE to be the one that reaches out, because it's very, very easy for product to be doing things and forget to pull in the SE and say, hey, by the way, did you know we were doing this thing, or this is the route that we're going? Same thing for the account executive who's off doing their own thing and going, I'll just pull in the SE when I need a demo, or more often they'll offer a POC and we have to be the one to build it. It's really important for you to actually build those relationships beforehand.
So you mentioned the AEs and our sales counterparts in the pre-sale space. How do you go about building a partnership with your AEs?
I think partnership is key. The best relationships are built on that foundation. Like, we both have a part to play in this piece, and that we should be working together towards this joint goal that we have. And so what I try and do with my account executives and my counterparts is really try and build out that partnership, this idea that we should be working together towards that kind of central goal. And there's a couple of things that I try and do within that. I believe in creating opportunities for collaboration. I believe in creating opportunities for connection. And I also think that it's really important to, I'd say, be on the same page, so to speak. We want to collaborate. We want to connect so we understand who we are as a person and find opportunities for us to work together. But we also want to make sure we're swimming in the same direction, so to speak. And I use a lot of water metaphors, so we're just going to continue with that.
I'll go with the flow.
Yeah, go with the flow. There you go.
You broke apart collaboration and connection, which I find really interesting. So can you give me an example of what does it look like to build an opportunity to collaborate versus an opportunity to connect? I'm sure that they also kind of go hand in hand, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Opportunities to collaborate and to connect are different in my mind. I think connection is establishing that we're both human, with needs and thoughts and career goals, right? Outside of this one particular opportunity that we're working on. It's coming to understand who people are and what direction they're going in life and finding a way to build rapport between us. It doesn't mean that we need to be the best of friends. We can just be colleagues. We don't have to talk about your family if you don't want to. But I think it's really important for me to understand, especially in this sort of AE SE relationship, how you work and who you are and what motivates you and what are you good at and what are you not good at. It's those kinds of connections that I'm looking to build. That's really different than collaboration. Because collaboration is how can we build opportunities to work together? Connections help us to collaborate better, and the collaboration gives us opportunities to connect more.
I love that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that human element, I think, is really important, especially because the motivations for SEs and AEs are pretty different at the end of the day. How do you see that played out in real life? Those differences in the dynamic then can kind of arise based off of those differences between AEs and SEs.
I think you're right. I think that the motivation for an SE and an AE are a little different. It feels like we're going towards the same goal, but then we also have like personal internal motivation, so to speak. I also talk in narrative terms as well. So just follow along with that too. So we've got internal motivations that hopefully lead us to the same thing, which is like, hey, we really want this deal to close. The AE is motivated probably by money because they're tied to some sort of quota, right? Like I got to hit that number. The SE is looking at that technical win. They want the checkbox that says, yes, this deal is great for you. The technologies match. We can integrate. We can do all of these things that we're telling you that we want. And when we get that, we're like, oh yeah, that felt good, right? And together, the hope is that the AE's motivation for money and then our motivation to get that technical win together combine into a deal that closes and a solution that's really good for the prospect that we're talking to. Tends to go wrong, in my opinion, when those two things are separated. And this is why I think partnership is so important. If AE is saying, we got to close it. We got to close it. We got to close it. And they're off in their world figuring out ways to close it. And they're not reaching across the aisle and saying, hey, SE, join me in this. Help me strategize. Help me think about this. Trying to find those ways that they can collaborate. Then we're not going to close that deal. And if we do close that deal, then we're going to lose it. They're going to churn later. Why? Well, because the AE, who is already dealing with a lot, doesn't have as much insight into the technology, the solution fit as we do. Opposite is also true. If I am so focused on the technical win that I ignore everything else, I ignore how much this is going to cost, and I ignore the business needs of the prospect that we're talking to. If I ignore the general economics of the world today, then that deal's not going to close. And even if I get that technical win, so what, right? The prospect doesn't get to use that solution because I wasn't reaching across the aisle and going to the AE and going, hey, I'd like to understand the business landscape of this customer because I think some of our solutions can help. Here's the ROI that I'm thinking about using our solution. Have we talked to them about XYZ PDQ? I don't know. It's that collaboration that I'm looking for. It's those opportunities to be better together that I'm really trying to find in my relationships with AEs.
I think I heard kind of a common theme there around feedback and communication between both parties. And I think that that makes a lot of sense. But where do we often go wrong? Probably a little bit in lack of communication, but where else do SEs often go wrong when approaching this relationship?
I think that's the biggest one, right? Is like the lack of communication. I think it's the lack of understanding of that partnership is really where we go wrong. And I see this most in folks who are newer to the space who come in and they say, all right, the AE, they've got a job. I'm an SE, I've got a job, and never the two shall meet. And then they helicopter in basically when someone needs something, and then they helicopter out when they're done giving their demo or doing the POC or doing the RFP. It's about keeping up with that relationship and maintaining not just lines of communication. I think that's important, but maintaining interest in it. Because I could talk to an AE every single day. And if I'm not talking to them about the strategy for a particular deal or what they're thinking about in this thing or how we can do things a different way from a technology perspective, then it doesn't matter if we've got a good personal relationship. It's not leading to the things we need it to lead to.
Some of my favorite memes ever to this day are ones I've seen on LinkedIn and even on Slack about the sales engineer versus account executive dynamic of like, oh, a last minute demo or not being included in discovery. They honestly make me laugh out loud. If you haven't seen some of those, it's definitely worth checking out. I'm sure that there's a hashtag around it. One of the things that we do in the PreSales Academy is we do talk about these dynamics, the difficulties that sometimes can arise because one person has a lot of pressure to close a deal while the other person has a lot of pressure to ensure there's a right fit. And it's important to keep that in mind, but not be jaded as they come into the pre-sales profession. I love that you brought up that this is a common mistake, maybe for folks that are a little bit early career. That's something that we try to think about is we don't want newcomers to come in with that perspective as in like, we're at bat with each other, but instead that there's nuances to the relationship that you want to keep in mind, but that you should really go out of your way to kind of play the part of a partner with that account executive.
And I think this is where the connection part comes in. Understanding that human piece that no, the AE, their job lives and dies by hitting their number, that puts a lot of pressure on them. That means they're probably going to push places that they shouldn't push because they need to hit that number. That even the best AEs are sometimes going to put their foot in their mouth because they really, really need this deal to close. That's a hard place to be in. I don't want to be in that role. That's why I'm not doing that work. So having that empathy, building those connections, I think that's why it's so important to have that type of relationship where you can see those things. And then that makes the collaborating bit a lot easier.
And I think at the end of the day, I think if you can find that partnership, then it becomes hopefully a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable when you're selling with someone that you feel like you can trust and communicate with. Tell me a little bit, maybe an example of an AE that, you have a really strong relationship with.
I can think of one in particular. Her name is Anne, and I love her to death because our relationship really is a partnership. And she pulls me in on deals that she's working on because I think she really understands that we're both in this for something. And something in particular that I think she's really good at doing is she'll give me a report, like a whole POV type report before we ever get on the call with someone, even if it's just an intro. And she'll say, Brandi, I know you're looking for things. Here's what I got. Is this helpful? And I'll go, yeah, can we also ask XYZ PDQ while we're on this initial call? And then she's absolutely amazing getting discovery and all the processes that I need to do my job really, really well. She's like, let me help you. Let me give you the tools that you need to do that. I think the opposite is also true then, because I am also here as we're doing discovery, as we're demoing, asking the sort of questions that I know she needs to understand as well. Like, what's the business landscape that you're in right now? What are you really trying for? What effects would a solution like this have on your business and things like that? Expanding past just the technical win. And we work really well together, I think, because of that, because we're both going towards how can we actually get this deal? We're not going to get it just by the AE showing up and spouting things. And we're not going to do it by me showing up and techno-babbling all the time. But together we can show up, understand where we each need help, and I can help get the process going faster, reach out to customers directly and get them to do the things I need. And she can reach out to me when she needs things from me as well. And it's this relationship that's back and forth. I think that really does it.
That sounds definitely like a power team. And, the goal, that's what we want to get to. So I'm curious for those maybe who are just starting out in pre-sales, what advice do you have or what would you tell someone about building that relationship? Like, how do we actually get there?
I think we've talked a lot about what I think of as the foundation of everything, and that's partnership. I think you have to go into relationships with everyone. I'm not just talking about your account executives. I mean, marketing and product and the customer success team and implementation. Ooh, implementation, let's be nice to these folks. Think of it as a partnership. It's not just you. You aren't the only one with needs. Everyone else is trying to get things accomplished. And the goal, right, is to get these things accomplished together in the best way possible. So first, have partnership be the foundation of your relationships and aiming for that. Second, I think in the form of, if we think about connection, actually scheduling opportunities to connect. And so what I mean by that is back in the pandemic days, I had a friend who I used to just see at work, and we would grab a cup of coffee and just talk, right? Water cooler stuff. During the pandemic, obviously, not a lot of opportunities to just randomly run into someone. And so what she did was she just pinged me one day and say, hey, you want to get a virtual coffee? Best 30 minutes of my life at the time, because I was really missing the connection with folks. Immediately after that, I just started pinging people and say, would you like to go on a virtual coffee? Would you like to grab a virtual drink or something like that? And then I started a cadence. So once a month, once every couple of weeks, I made an intention to connect with the folks around me. That would be my second thing, is put some intentionality towards those connections. You don't have to talk about work. You can strictly talk about work. But the idea is that you're trying to build a partnership, a relationship where you're both in it to win. And I think for that to happen, you have to have opportunities to connect with each other. So set up a regular cadence with the folks that you want to connect with and do that. And I don't care how often it is, just do it. Third is obviously finding those opportunities to actually collaborate. Sometimes that means reaching across the aisle and saying, hey, how can I help you? Or I built this. Do you think this would be helpful for you? But it also means like reaching across the aisle and saying, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything that I can provide to you that will increase your chances of success? And I think if you're both doing that, that's the best relationships, where you can both see those opportunities to connect and collaborate. And then lastly, and I just do this, I don't think this is a requirement, but I like to celebrate the people in my life, which means finding opportunities to celebrate those partnerships, to say, hey, congratulations on that win, or Anne did an amazing job with this proposal. You guys should check it out, and showing that to the rest of the team. Having opportunities to celebrate people in your life, and in particular, the business relationships that we have at work, means that not only are we in these relationships to win and to have some big goal at the end, but also that it gives us an opportunity to show that we appreciate the relationship as well. And I'm a big fan of appreciating people and building those connections. That aspect, celebrating, is the sprinkle on top of the partnership.
Amazing. I'm really clinging to one thing that you said, which is the intentionality. I think that it can be easy to just show up somewhere and just focus on doing the job and getting something done. But what I'm hearing from you is that in both kind of fostering opportunities to collaborate and connect and celebrate others, is there's this intentionality, going out of your way to make something happen and being proactive about that.
It's got to be intentional. And I say that because it is very hard to build relationships. You're doing your work, your AE is doing their work, product is doing their work, and everyone sort of heads down, especially in this day and age when there's a lot of layoffs and you might be doing more work than you were doing before. It is really hard to maintain the connections that you had before. So you have to go in with some intentionality. You have to go in with, hey, I am building this to be better. And I want to maintain this because I see a lot of benefit in maintaining that relationship. So we talked a lot about AEs, but I think of this with product as well, and marketing. I work with a lot of people, but if we can maintain those relationships, if we can keep them going, if we can keep the collaboration in place, then we all win faster and better, I want to say, than if we were doing this separately.
I love that you brought up marketing, because we oftentimes always talk about the AE relationship and sometimes get into product, but that relationship with marketing is a little less talked about. What does that look like for you? How have you gone about kind of fostering that relationship with marketing?
I don't know if it's just the nature of me as a person, but I get tapped to do a lot of marketing demos for the team. Our product marketing team is dedicated to both external marketing, but also internal. So passing around information about where the product is going and why. So I get involved in a lot of that. Part of it is because I am in particular really, really dedicated to enablement, SE enablement in particular. And so a lot of opportunities to do that, both with marketing and with our sales enablement team, which I work with a lot. But marketing in particular, I think that there is a really great overlap in the work that we do and the work that they do. They too are trying to present the technology and the organization to prospects in a way that is engaging, hits the buttons and shows them how we can solve problems. So we're doing similar work. They're just not as technically deep as we are. And so that overlap is kind of natural. And what I find is that I learn all sorts of new things from them and the ways in which we can position ourselves. And I think they learn from me too, because I have a more technical knowledge about it. And I'm probably seeing more customers than they are on a daily basis. And so I can share things that I learn and ways that I position things. And they're like, ooh, we should steal that and use that in the product marketing. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally do that. So I agree. I think it's a not often talked about realm. But again, we're SEs. We sit sort of in the middle of all these different departments, which is why building out those spokes is really important.
So what about from the perspective of leaders? What can leaders do to better foster these internal relationships amongst their pre-sales teams and other departments?
What I've seen work really well is fostering processes that really build out those relationships. So, example, I run our internal SE meeting. I call it the Sharing Excellence Show. And I go all out. It's a lot of fun. But something that we do, and I work with our leadership team to do this, is bring in different parts of the organizations to share with us and to also have us share with them. So building out those communication funnels, I think, are really important. And having it be a process that is not necessarily perpetual, that there's a cadence to it. So, all right, we're a huge organization. I can't always go to product when I have a need, but is there a process for me to ask a question and get some sort of response? Is there a process for me to make suggestions and also get some response? Is there a process for us to see what product is working on and how they're working on it and what they're thinking about and what they're hearing from the market, and then bring that to us? So there's that. That's a very strategic sort of building, right? It's building out processes that bring people in and also give us opportunities to branch out. But I also think what's really important is for leadership to build a culture of partnership. What do I mean by that? I mean that your leadership team can't be so far away from you that you never talk to them. Your leadership team can't be so far away and so into the strategy that they don't know what I'm working on. I don't know what they're thinking about strategy wise. I think my current company is really, really actually good at that. I have a standing cadence with our VP of the sales engineering team. I've got a standing cadence with my manager. I have standing cadences with a lot of people, but you get the drift. It's not unusual. They do this with all sorts of folks. So that culture of reaching out and being the center of the spoke as well also means that other SEs and other folks on our team are more likely to do the same, to reach across the aisle, even within the same organization, and learn from each other.
One thing that you mentioned earlier, and I think I'm paraphrasing what you were saying, that, relationships don't happen overnight, that it takes time to develop them. And what I've heard throughout this entire conversation is setting up a cadence. So whether it's one-on-one or with a team, or providing an avenue for folks to connect together in a group. And I think that goes back to the idea that it's not as much about what you do every once in a while, but it's what you're doing every day, every week, every month that is contributing to these relationships. And so I think that it's strategic advice, but it's also very practical too, as far as like setting up those cadences, providing those opportunities. So before we actually kind of wrap up here, these are kind of big ideas as far as building relationships, whether it's with AEs or with other departments. But if you had to tell someone today, what should they go do right now to build better relationships internally, what would you tell them?
First things first, pick an SE on your team right now, someone that you don't know, and say, hey, would you like to grab a virtual coffee with me? It could be an in-person coffee. And it doesn't have to be today. It could be next week. It could be whatever. Just as long as you get the, sure from them, set that up and then set a cadence. Again, it doesn't have to be every week. It could be once a month. It could be once every 6 months. The idea, though, is that you're putting intentionality to building those relationships. And to your point, there is a cadence. Do that with someone on your team right now. So another SE, and then do that with at least one of your AEs. And I think that is a really great place to start. Once you do that, once you were like, oh, actually, this is good. I'm at a cadence and this is really beneficial to me. Then I think you start thinking about all the other places where you could probably reach across the aisle and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about you and what you do. Would you like to connect for 30 minutes once every 3 months? I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then I said before that you have to create opportunities to collaborate. Part of that is connecting consistently, but it's also keeping other parts of the business and other people in mind when you are building things for yourself, when you are engaging with other folks. An example of that, I once got this checklist of implementation questions from an implementation partner at one of the companies I worked at. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that you guys had an internal thing. This is super helpful. And I was using that for a while. I kind of messed with it and made it so I could use it for my personal discovery checklist because it really helped me to understand what the implementation needed. And then I realized, I think at some point that, this would actually be really beneficial to share with other people. And so I just reached out to folks and said, hey, do you think this would be beneficial? Would you like a copy of this? And of course, it was helpful. So things like that, things that you might be doing that other parts of the business might find useful, totally do that. There's another thing that I was working on fairly recently, which I said I was really into sales enablement and in particular SE enablement. And something that I was noticing was that we didn't have a lot of customer stories that were helpful from a solutioning aspect. So we really, from an SE perspective, wanted to understand what solution was sold and how people are actually using it and what benefit they were getting out of it. And I wanted more stories like that. So I thought it'd be kind of a cool idea to do a podcast. It's fun, it's engaging, right? And I found out just listening to folks and having conversations with people that the sales enablement team were also thinking about a podcast. And I was like, oh, this is great. Here's a way that I can collaborate with another team I don't talk to a lot, but maybe we can work on this one project together. And then I can sit here as a representative of the SE team and sort of steer them a little closer to some of the things that we need. Those kinds of opportunities don't happen out of the blue. They happen because, I had the intent to build relationships with folks and because I'm always kind of looking for ways to create opportunities between folks.
What great examples and practical advice. I think that those are things that people can actually go out and actually do today to help foster those relationships, which will take time. But I think incorporating these tips will help them get there so much faster because it's that intentionality. Brandi, this has been amazing. I can't thank you enough for joining me here today. But before we close out, it's my understanding that you're starting a podcast of your own. And why don't you just give the listeners a little insight into what that's going to be before we close out?
It's called SE Diaries, and we're taking a look under the covers, so to speak, of the SE world, really taking a peek into what it takes to do our jobs. And so I've interviewed just a bunch of folks across the space, and this first season is really about what it took to get us here and the journeys that we took along the way to become sales engineers. I've been working on it for like a year through a bunch of bumps in the road, and my intent is to release it this year. So if you are interested, feel free to ping me about it.
I'm hoping that I'll hear a bunch of water analogies and examples in those episodes too. But thanks again, Brandi. This was amazing, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Alrighty, folks. Thanks for joining for another episode of the PreSales Podcast. Brandi did an incredible job of highlighting the importance of developing meaningful relationships internally and establishing partnerships. I would encourage you to think about the way that you're approaching your relationships within your own team and across other departments, and identify ways that you can go above and beyond to build true partnerships, which we know don't happen overnight. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.